Good afternoon, everyone. My job is to talk about IT and network challenges. We work as an independent consultancy and see a lot of changes coming about. So I've called this also Redefining the Way We Work and the Drivers for Change. We've come a long way, haven't we, in the IT world? And I was looking back at some of the slides that I've sort of used over the years, and I was thinking about, remember the old film boxes? And then we moved on to more sophisticated type workstations, and then to templating. So the utilization of what we used to do with film onto screens and templating, well, now that becomes a matter of course. Of course, computing's also come a long way. I remember the first Apple computers, I'm sad to say. My first luggable laptop, which had a 2 meg hard drive in it. And we thought that was very sophisticated. And then moving up through, obviously we had the Intel chips come along, and we've seen things come along a long way. So back down memory lane, looking at some of the computers that we used to work with or used to play with, most of them now are in museums, which is rather sad. And then, of course, what we used to view them on. Now, this was a 1996 RSNA, utilising huge CRTs. Now, you didn't want to stand near those CRTs because each one was giving off about a kilowatt of heat. Then, of course, you move to modern day technology where you have flat screens and a user sitting around in comparatively comfort. So what do we see, the major issues today? Okay, number of people that we have to manage a system. The environmental issues, that's very much forgotten when it comes to IT. People go and put these servers and racks of stuff into a data center without actually thinking about how much energy is required to do it. One of the biggest problems at the moment in the East End of London is providing enough data centers because of the onset of the Olympics and the provision of the energy. So a huge issue which people forget. And space and footprints of systems. Now, we've just recently seen one IT supplier come back with a server system that was 4 times less the space for 10 times the capacity. So 4 racks being replaced to 1, but having 10 times the capacity. So a lot of changes going on there as well. And of course, getting it right at this stage, particularly if you're planning for the future, can save a lot of money. So what we're seeing is the technology and industry changes. We now accept fast, wide area networks. You know, we all run around, or most of us run around with 3G phones. I notice there's a wireless in here. We expect to have fast networks. We don't just demand it, we expect it. And secure access control, you know, how many of us do online banking? We assume it's going to be safe. If we play all the rules correctly in terms of various protections and where we go, it's fairly secure and controlled. Most amazing thing is that storage has increased in capacity for a reduced footprint. You can now buy a standard 3.5-inch drive which has 2 terabytes of storage on it. You know, for what, £70? You think what that was like 5 years ago. Virtualization, which is another key issue now as computing challenges are changing. You have one server now with virtualization can run 10 different processes, where in the past you'd have 10 servers. So a lot of changes going on in the technology. And then, of course, the standards committees, IHE, DICOM and HL7, have got a pretty good act together now pushing through transfer of standards and transfer of information about patients of where we want them to be. Whether the industry adopts them is up to us to make sure that they do, because in our buying power we can ensure that these standards are adhered to, so we can cross-transfer data very easily. Why shouldn't we be able to? So the key issues we see, particularly in the industry we're seeing at the moment, we've come a long way. But when we come to store or manage data, at the moment, we need to change. I'll add on to that a bit more. We're now seeing a complete revolution in the amount of information that needs to be stored. Now, we haven't seen anything yet, because the biggest challenge that we're going to have is at the very top of the list there, which is digital pathology, which is about to hit the streets. Now, if we think CT's big, pathology, we're talking of gigabytes of data per patient study. So not megabytes anymore, we're into gigabytes. These are highly resolvable colour images of various histology studies. Already starting in America, won't be long before we see it hit the streets here. So the drivers we have for healthcare, we're seeing vast growth in data. Everybody wants the information, everybody wants access to the information. So therefore, we're seeing different users wanting access to that information that was really only surrounding perhaps radiology or cardiology. What we're seeing now is the general physician would like access or knowledge of those records. We even have it in some instances where it even goes to GP level. And of course, having an electronic master record enables these things to be pulled together for given patients. The other area that's being discussed a lot at the moment is for research. So we anonymise the information, but it can be used for ongoing research. So requirements are constantly changing. The government mandates are changing as well. For example, in some European countries, they're now keeping the records for up to 30 years. So we're thinking that might be a good idea that one of the countries you could turn into a huge data centre and perhaps manage it for the whole of Europe. Is that necessary? I don't know. And we're now seeing much more of a dynamic vendor environment as more clinical tools come to pass that can utilise that data in a much better way. I mean, we see this with computer-aided design and computer-aided diagnostics from people like the Finians, who can actually identify cancers before any other technique can be found using the very same data that you couldn't detect before. So standards become more important because we need to be able to cross-transfer that data to different areas. So what we're seeing there is that the ownership of the data has to become the choice of the healthcare provider. So we have three basic powers: choice, control, flexibility. And the final one I put on there is networking, because as I said before, we all assume now we have fast networks. We don't even think about it. Current challenge we see, we currently have separate islands of information. So if you walk into a hospital, you've got radiology, cardiology, oncology, all the ologies, all doing their own thing. Now, remember what I talked about storage costs? They all have their own bespoke servers and storage facilities. They're probably only 40 or 50% utilised at any one time. So we go out and buy 30 terabytes of storage for radiology. Next door, cardiology have gone and bought another 30 terabytes. And then we'll only use those over the 7-year period. Why don't we pull them together and utilise it as we have a need? Remember, all those disks are sitting there spinning, consuming energy. So the other one is, a very, very big challenge at the moment, is when do we purge data? You know, do we need to have somebody's broken arm recorded forever? Huge question marks over that. Is it important? Who's going to make that decision? Interesting comments. Data migration. What we're seeing is that people are migrating out of one proprietary system into another. So in 5, 6 years' time, they'll do just the same again. Great for business for people like me, but in terms of ongoing business, is a huge issue. And cost. We're now wanting to break this concept of a vendor-centric approach. You know, I go and buy a PACS system from one vendor, I buy cardiology from a different vendor, and I buy them all from different vendors, and they all have their own ways of doing things. Is there a way that we can bring that data together rather than see the data explosion we're seeing at the moment around the concentric approach? So the goals must be significantly reduce the archive costs. Remember I talked about data centers, these huge boxes of spinning disks, half the time not being utilized? Bring them together. Let's use that island of information to store data from almost any source. So, leverage existing archive infrastructure for expansion into the new world, into all the ologies. Use information like lifecycle management approach to establish what we need to do in terms of archive standardization. Provide a uniform retention, purge, and compression rules and migrate the risk, because we can compress lots of images to a high level of compression without losing quality. Now the physicists will tell you that you do, but I bet most people wouldn't notice the change. Establish a data migration methodology and migrate once. So migrate onto a unified platform, and then from there on, your PACS, your cardiology becomes an application surrounding your data management. So what we say is to move to a vendor-neutral strategy or a vendor-neutral archiving strategy to have vendor independence. So therefore, we then have an effective archival refresh strategy and a multi-site connectivity. So what I mean by that is, we can go out to all the IT vendors and say, give us your best price for storage on an annual basis. Now, on a year-to-year, we know that storage costs halve and capacities double. And with the new technologies around the corner of solid-state storage, the sky's going to be the limit. Bearing in mind, the back of your mind is what are the energy costs of running those data centers? If you've never been into one, it's worth going in, because the biggest cost to have in them is the air conditioning. And on the outside of the wall, they have huge air conditioning units pumping the energy out from the spinning disks to keep it at a nice environment. And when I mean a nice environment, better than a lot of the human beings have to suffer. So what we're seeing there is the enablement of a single patient jacket approach and content management. So when we deliver information to a physician, whoever that physician might be, is relevant and on time. Relevance is one important thing. So what we see today is current landscapes, where we're seeing all these things. They all sit above the top. They all have those little silos of information. Quite a common approach. So what we're saying there is, let's break this mold and move to a much more enterprise strategy. Now we can do this because this sort of technology, or vendor-neutral archiving, allows this, and also the technology of networks allows us to do this too. So this keep the two technologies very much in mind. So we see straight away that your radiology, your cardiology becomes an application sitting upon what we describe as enterprise storage. And then from the enterprise image archive, we utilize the general storage commitment types to allow us then to pick up all the relevant and modern day storage technologies that are being brought by HP, IBM, EMC, Hitachi, etc. And then future imaging comes along, so we can hook those all in. So what we're seeing there is an enterprise archiving strategy that allows us to make the inputs as applications. It allows us to utilize hardware media as it's developed, and then allows us to use the storage management protocols to replicate that information, and then overall the utilization of good standards, DICOM, HL7, XDS, etc., into what we would describe as vendor-neutral archive. Simple. So we're now looking at the storage management as an overall block within a hospital or clinical environment. So we always say, any ology, no islands of information. So these are the biggest things we're starting to see: radiology, dermatology, cardiology, all the ologies you're seeing coming along. And I say the biggest challenge is going to be when pathology comes into the ball game. Networking. Critical areas of networking? Well, probably things like multidisciplinary team meetings, where you have a whole group of physicians who want to see information now. So big challenges. Other areas are on ward rounds. This is utilisation of a tablet, putting patient data actually on the tablet. So it's available straight away for anybody to view. How many hospitals have you seen using that? I mean, I was in a hospital the other day and they're still using the bits of paper, and there was one nurse using her hand because she hadn't got a notebook. Why? So the other one is a thing called thin client technology. Now, we're all used to the Google type search engines, so why haven't we got that now in medical? Why aren't we using a Google type search engine? Well, the technology's there. Technology with the use of XDSI and WADO allows us then to use a thin client technology that can bring pages and images up in a matter of seconds, even over mobile networks. And remember how the Google technology works. It gives you a fuzzy picture and builds. Nothing resides on your local PC. Everything comes from a central server. Again, reliant on networks, but very fast and efficient. Goes across, whether it's a PC or a Mac or whatever, but very fast. How many thin client technologies have we seen in action yet? Very few. This is just one that we're quite familiar with. This can bring up these sorts of images across a standard hospital network in about 2.5 seconds. So pretty quick. So thin client relies upon all the data and the visualization on a server from your data center, and then VIing out across your LAN or your WAN out to any given type desktops. Not reliant upon whether it's Windows or Mac, it can work across both. So what we're seeing here is on the data side, we're seeing very much that the PACS vendors currently control the data formats and often the storage hardware, and therefore you have what we call vendor locking. So you as a user have no access. For example, if you want to go and put a new CT scanner onto your network, you have to pay somebody from your PACS vendor to come and do it. Shouldn't you be able to do that yourself? So we say vendor locking makes it difficult to switch vendors, to add new applications, to leverage existing infrastructure, and share data between applications. We're seeing that all the time at the moment, where hospitals are unable to share their information one to another. So an extra box has had to be put in to the national program to allow this to happen. Why? Anyway, integrate with the hospital information systems and the management systems and other information systems to allow that cross-transfer of information. And then you only really want to do data migration once when you have a new vendor or upgrading. Data migration is a huge topic at the moment in the NHS as people are coming and looking towards the end of the contract come June 2013. Because if they want to migrate from one system to another, it takes about 12 months of planning, 12 months to actually achieve the results of migrating large volumes of data. It takes a couple of months of planning. So what we're saying is a vendor-neutral archive splits the storage from the application, allows you best of breed. So this is what we currently have, and then you move to having a centralized view of all that management of information. Effective routing and workflow is another important thing of this. Reduces network usage. If you're allowed to view patient metadata and decide what you actually want to see, reduces network incredibly. Data access to HL7 and DICOM metadata at each node. So these are the sort of things that we're starting to see come in to allow more efficient routing. We say never again migration. configured, not customized, robust clinical ILM, agnostic, and PACS acceleration enhancement. So some of the critical things we see very much coming around neutral archiving. Next big topic that we're starting to see hit the streets, particularly in Eastern Europe now, is the utilisation of a portal. So what is a portal? Well, a portal is a web system that provides the functions and features to authenticate, identify the users. What it does basically is a user sits down, uses the portal, wants to see your information, the system checks, do they have the rights to do that? Who are they? Where are they? Have you given permission? When they do that, they then can go out and get a custom picture of you across one screen system or two screen system, depending what they're doing. So what we see here is a whole range of what a portal can provide. So, provides a comprehensive patient management tool and allows you to order, manage, report, distribute information from one system utilising the IHE DICOM HL7 standards. Portal workflow allows scheduling, protocolling, patient registration. We'll even check the doctor's credentials against college recommendations or licensing. So we see quite an advance coming in with the utilisation of a portal. What we see in the future, data access. We're starting to see now more and more patient access, aren't we, with NHS Direct. Patients are demanding this. Transmission of data, data security, web technologies, thin client technologies, tablet PDAs. The one somebody talked to me about the other day, could we use iPads on a ward round? I think they probably could, but I don't know how long they would last remaining in the hospital. But the answer is yes, why not? Technology's catching up, new types of screen technology, polymer screens, high security with biometrics, and then the industry coming together to utilise some of the new IHE standards of cross-data sharing and cross-data sharing images. So use of XDS, XDSI, and then, as I said before, the utilisation of portals. IT and networking, and what I've said is the key issues, just to reiterate, people and the management of the system. How many people will I need to manage some of these future systems? What is the energy consumption? What is the footprint of the system? One of the recommendations we're now giving to some of the trusts in terms of when they go out to tender is to split the tenders into an information system requirement, into the applications, into data storage, and into hosting. Why should hospitals host all the data themselves? Why not put it off to somebody else who can do it for you? And then getting this right at this stage can save a lot of money. So just looking at the technology we see how the life has changed, and with the technology swinging around, we're now into this situation I never forget, which is quite true, isn't it, if you are waiting for a network. Thank you.